Our products that are just differentiated is way too modest. They're completely unique, and both in terms of how they're built and how we service them and how we interact with clients and how we're building currently. Foundry is objectively the best commercial software product in the world. Look at the speed of our product development over the last 2 years. It's actually, sped up. It completely just while doing a DPO, while creating a sales force. We're accelerating on all fronts.
Yeah.
We have the best product in the world. We have also a stature and access that we didn't have before. We have resources we didn't have before, both financial and reputational. It's one thing to sell a product that is like A plus B plus C minus F. It's another thing to say, we're the whole alphabet, and by the way, we're the alphabet of the future.
So I thought today, instead of taking a look at the news for Palantir, we could circle back and revisit the interview that Alex Karp did, the 40-minute long interview. I put out a supercut video to that event, but I want to pull some clips from it and offer some commentary on different sections. He talked about a wide variety of topics, including SPACs, which I'll just say now is that he said they're investing in SPACs, one of the reasons being to see how those companies can push Foundry further, push the limits, push the envelope on Foundry, so that Palantir kind of gets a feedback loop there and they're able to develop and iterate on their product in that regard, which I thought is not something many people have realized. So it's a very interesting insight that they've had and how they're looking to close the loop on product development that way. So I've picked out 4 sections here, the first being individual investors and institutional investors. I'll play some clips of Karp talking about these, but the overall sentiment being that Karp really does respect the individual investors, the people that take the time to understand the product. And he says how once they take a look at Palantir's technology technically, it really does become obvious the investing opportunity that they have to then invest in Palantir. And conversely, when talking about institutional investors, he says there's a real gap of understanding, which then, in my opinion, turns into a gap of opportunity, because if institutional investors don't understand the technicality of Palantir's products, and maybe that lasts for a few years, there is a gap. That is part of my thesis around Palantir. I don't think they are well understood. And take a listen to Karp here.
It's surprising how much time and energy and thought the average person puts into understanding our software. That's the positive. And Palantir has approximately 1.5 million investors. These are people who have taken the time to actually understand what we're doing. Yeah, I find it super heartening to, when we interact with people, investors and others who are technical enough to understand the problems we've solved, and then have taken the time to go deep enough into the product demos to understand that, we've actually solved a lot of these problems. As technical people engage with our product, because they may just be looking at it as like an investment option, and they're like, wow, okay, this is real. The negative version is how little time and effort some professional analysts take in understanding what software is, since it's their profession. Wall Street analysts who take the time to actually look at our products, which is not enough, honestly.
All right, and now we're going to talk about technical talent. I'm going to play some more clips from Karp. This is perhaps the longest part of the video because he took a lot of time on their interview to talk about how Palantir is retaining top talent. And notice how it is top talent. It's not talent. It's the best software engineers that they can possibly get. And before I show you these clips, I want to show you, I did some digging and found a resource online that ranks Palantir 75th for 2020 when it comes to computer science engineer recruiting. Now granted, I was very surprised actually to see Palantir down in the 70s, but this was in 2020. They went public in the second half of the year, and wow, you'll hear Karp say that traditionally companies don't recruit well after they've gone public. I think the opposite is going to be true for Palantir. The more people that understand what the company's about, what their mission is, the better I think they will be able to attract top talent. And of course, this resource right here is not measuring the best performant engineers, it's just measuring some sort of attractiveness objective measure, which I have no way of knowing how they are calculating that. But anyway, good to see Palantir at least on the list. Of course, we want to see them in the top 10, but I have no doubt that will come with time. It should take a good number of years to rise in the list, but I wouldn't be surprised if Palantir does get up there by 2025 or so. Regardless, have a listen to Karp. He really does make it sound like, using his own metric, Palantir is leading the pack when it comes to recruiting the best, the cream of the crop, the ones that actually matter. Have a listen.
We've been able to retain and recruit the very, very best people since inception. And this is like, as you know, been a constant frustration for Silicon Valley, that we disproportionately got the best people to not only come to Palantir, but stay. And we are still very focused on recruiting the very best, most inquisitive, hardest working, insightful, technical, primarily technical talent in the world from any place we can find it. I think the cultural change of what it means to be at Palantir, which is you get to work on the transformational software of tomorrow with some of the more interesting people in the world in your company and some of the most interesting clients outside of your company. It's a cultural nirvana. It allows us not to hire. We still roughly have the same number of people we did a year ago. Yeah. And it's like, and then, but our company is expanding rapidly, and that allows us to have a very narrow, tight, and specific kind of culture while having a broad ability to service the world with our software. Engineers are very, very skeptical, as you know. You're an engineer. So if somebody's claiming, oh, this product has great software, what's the first thing you're going to do? Yeah. Go think, oh, this isn't great. I'm going to go check it out. Yeah, and it's like, it's usually, by the way, not so great. So you come to Palantir and, it's like, you just go looking at Palantir, like, okay, well, let me look at what I think they're doing with the code base. And you're like, wow, that's cool. That's cool. Wow, that's super cool. Oh, this looks like a problem they're actually working on that they're not yet talking about. I'd like to be involved. And then, of course, once you've gotten past that hurdle, then you look at the quality of the people. Now, what you find is like leadership that from beginning to the end actually is working on driving these things. And that just leads to a recruiting charisma. And we're really seeing very strong interest in joining Palantir. We ran the company where everybody has a part in the company. From an equity perspective and a participation in the company, we also give people at Palantir enormous responsibility, which is appealing. Yeah. If you're, you just say you've just left school and you believe and maybe are the world's best software engineer of one archetype or another, do you really want to work 30 years under somebody before you actually get to write code to the trunk? Or do you want to be writing code that's actually used from people that might actually know some things about writing code that you didn't learn in school that are at your level or conceivably better? And I believe internally it's like, look at the quality of the people we have, and then you can imagine these people running Palantir. I see people who will be running parts of Palantir in the next couple of years. But, a simple way, just look at the people it's attracting to work at Palantir. They go look at Foundry. You're sitting there as somebody who's a world-class engineer that wants to work somewhere, and they go look at what we're doing and like, okay, I want to work on that. That's why our recruiting is so strong. Post DPO, which again is like highly anomalous. So, we didn't have, our first commercial products were failures, and that's not actually, there's a tendency, unfortunately, outside of the U.S., and it's one of the reasons why the U.S. is so strong in this, that we embrace trying and failing, right? So it's like that. There's no shame in our failures. It's like we learned a lot, and so that there'll always be a way in which Palantir will overperform technically compared to other institutions. In my humble opinion, dramatically outperform any other institution in the world on the software product. If you just look like. Normal companies have one product that is 10 years old and then they're acquiring companies. And there's a lot of technical issues in that are massively underestimated because actually these products the code bases are not meant to come together. But even culturally, there's obviously enormous issues. Palantir has built what amounts to hundreds of products. Like Foundry is hundreds of products in one product, fully integrated, and now will be made also fully disintegrated. So it's like we're really, really good at that. So we significantly outperform all others on the technical development and delivery.
And this is perhaps the most troubling part of the interview that I've had, and I'm not sure if everyone watching this will agree with me, but he talks about how he felt pressure to take the company public as a way to offer liquidity to early shareholders, of course, many of those being those early employees. Definitely a valid reason for wanting to take the company public, but also on the other hand, I would rather have the CEO and the company be 100% ready and not rush out the door to do a DPO. So that's neither here nor there now that Palantir is public, but it makes me wonder if they would have perhaps waited a little longer if Karp wasn't feeling pressured, as he says, from such investors.
I would say, though, the most important thing for me is I personally, people like you who are long-term veterans at Palantir, we're sitting on a pile of things that, you called equity that were not only declining in value, but were illiquid and stayed. And I had a lot of pressure to make sure that, people who had, invested their labor, that you bore the fruits of that investment at some point in the future, especially since it's not the case that everyone stayed at Palantir because of me, but some people did. But the relief of not having this pressure on my back is enormous and very, very freeing.
Yeah.
And so I'm happy about that.
And finally, I'm just going to play another clip here and I'll be back to wrap up the video.
The thing that is really interesting about Palantir is once you've bought Palantir and you've used it and it's been implemented in a way that actually works, which is a hard thing because there's a cultural change on both sides probably to actually use the software of the future today. And we've seen this in every context, not just the military, not just Intel, but across industry. But once you've gone through that, you're very unlikely to be satisfied with what you're going to get on the market. And this has given us one of the reasons we've survived despite our charming personalities is people are like, yeah, the personality's a little bit odd, but the software is really performant. Yeah. And the more you use it, the more performant it becomes for people. But yeah, there's a big cultural issue there. Yeah.
So in my opinion, this is what Wall Street will learn over the next couple years. It's about how Palantir has the best products in their categories, hands down. And it will take time for this to be realized by the market and for Palantir to settle in and gain significant market share of Fortune 500 companies, governments around the world. But as I said earlier, the opportunity is actually the gap of understanding. In my opinion, I am trusting and believing in Palantir and its ability to grow, its ability to attract top talent, its ability to get huge contracts in the government and commercially. And again, it just goes back to the fact that Palantir is going to blow away revenue estimates, maybe not quarter over quarter, but year over year. They're sandbagging. They're going to do way more than $4 billion in revenue in 2025. I think they are just being cautious and conservative in their guidance, but I'm not sure that Wall Street is expecting Palantir to come out and blow those estimates away. So anyway, I thought this would be a useful recap video to kind of go through and break down the most important clips, in my opinion, from the interview. Even if you've heard some of these clips before, I think it's worth watching them again, and I hope this video was insightful. I'll be back tomorrow for Friday, June 18th. Until next time.